¿Oye? Sí, ¿no? Vale. Vamos un poco tarde, así que voy a empezar casi ya. I'm going to start because this talk is in English. So, yeah, let's go. Welcome to this session. It's about the Form API workflow, the Drupal Form API, of course. I'm Ricardo Sanz. I'm a Drupal developer and DevOps and some other things. And I like open free software and weird music. If you want to talk about weird music, you can talk to me. And I'm one of the founders of Metadrop, a company here in Spain that we are focused on Drupal and on hard problems, because we like hard problems because they are the funny ones. So the walkthrough of this talk is the following. We are going to explain a little bit what is the Form API. Then we'll see a simplified workflow. Then we'll see the detailed Form API stages of the workflow. We'll see the cache and persistence mechanism. We'll see the AJAX requests. And finally, we'll see the complete workflow, an illustration with the complete workflow. And at the end, I will highlight the key points that you should keep if, from this talk, there's the most important things. So the Form API. What is the Form API? It's simple. It's an abstraction for HTML forms. So it's a way to handle HTML forms using code. It handles the submission, the persistence, altering the forms, and the rendering. It also handles security, the AJAX mechanism. Also, it allows to alter the forms by other modules or other code, and also takes care of the safety, because security and safety is something very important. And of course, it allows you to create custom forms. And how is this done? Well, there is a form builder service that handles the forms. There are many classes involved, like form builder, form validator, form base, etc. Usually, you have a class that implements the form interface, and that usually extends the form base class. And a form is it's composed by a form array, usually the $form variable, and a form state, that it's usually the $form state variable that I'm sure you already know. The form array is just a PHP array. It has the structure and the behavior of the form. It's not exactly a render array. It resembles a render array, but it's not a render array. We'll see this later in this session. And the form array is available during all the Form API stages, so you usually can modify, change, or do some things with it. And the form state is usually a form state instance, implements the form state interface, and contains the state of the form. So it means the inputs of the form, any errors, and some flags to keep the state of the form. It's available as well during all the Form API stages, and it can be changed during the stage, as we will see. Some notable values that you may need to know. It's the form ID. The form ID is just the identifier of the type of the form. Let's say it's like the class of the form, the type of the form. And then you have the form build ID. This is the specific form build. It's like let's say, talking about oriented programming, it's like the instance. And the token is a value that ensures that the form was previously requested. We'll see a little bit later about this. So let's see a simplified Form API workflow. What happens when the user requests a form? It's simple. At some point of the code, the getForm function is called. Then Drupal calls the build function of the form that returns a form. Then the alter hooks are called, so any other code can, or module or whatever can change or alter the form. Then Drupal recursively build all the form elements. That's creating a render array, and then it's returned to the next layer. What happens when the user submits a form? So the form has been sent to the user has done whatever with the form and has pressed the submit button. It's kind of the same. Drupal encounters the getForm function, calls the form build function, and builds the form again from scratch. This is required because Drupal needs to compare the submit values by the user with the actual form to check that everything is correct, that the user is not trying to tamper anything or sending any value that is not allowed. Once the form is built, it's validated, and if there are errors, the form is returned to the user with errors, and if not, the form is executed using the submit handlers, and the response is returned to the user. What happens when the user submits a form that it's rebuilt? It's more or less the same. Drupal builds the form, then validates it, and if there are no errors, it continues with the rebuild. If there are errors, the rebuild is not. It's not. I mean, it can be done, and it's returned with the errors. And if there are, if there are no errors, the submit handlers are executed, and then the rebuild is enabled. That means that the form is it's built again, so it can be changed and then returned to the user. This is what we call the rebuilding loop, where the user requests a form, the Drupal delivers the form, user submits the form, and then we enter on the loop where the user submits the form, Drupal processes the form and rebuilds it and sends it back to the user until the user makes the final submit. This is what happens when, for example, you add a new field to a multi-valued, a new value in a multi-valued field. So on the first image, we have just one element on the form, and the user submits the form clicking on the add another item. So the form is rebuilt, and at the end it's returned almost the same, but with another element there. So this is the usual mechanism used to create dynamic forms on Drupal. And about the responses of the form, what can you return? You can return just a markup, for example, redirection. You can, a rebuild form in the sense of a form that has some changes that are sent to the user, a form with errors, or whatever the submit decides, but the other, in the first option, has the usual. And that's the workflow of the API, and it's that simple. Well, it's yes and no. It's simple because at the end it's the workflow I have just shown to you. But there are other things. For example, how the security are handled, how Drupal keeps track of the data between the requests, how the AJAX is handled, validation, submission, rebuilding, and some other workflow details. And that's what we are going to see now. So let's see the workflow in detail, and let's see the Form API stages. The first one, 1 from 5, it's the retrieve and prepare. this stage, it's related to the form build function. It's also where the dynamic elements are added to the form, and on rebuild is where the form is recreated. It's probably the stage where you know more. And we have also the prepare part of this stage, where the build ID is added. The security token is added also. This is only for registered users, and it prevents the cross-site request forgery, but it's a common attack on websites. The alter hooks are run here, and this is the first place to customize an existing form. It's the first place and the usual place that you will use most of the time, because here, as I said before, are the alter hooks. If we see this in a diagram, this is the part of the diagram of this stage. As you see, well, if there is a value, the form is in the cache, is retrieved from the cache. If not, we enter in this stage, and as you see, first we call the forms build function, and then we add the other values and call the alter hooks. Okay. So at this stage, the output of this stage is a build form that, as I said before, is not a render array, although it's very similar. All dynamics elements are in place, all alterations are in place, and this is what we call the unprocessed form. The next stage is the recursive building. The goals of this stage is to get a renderable array that the render layer can render and send to the user. This stage collects the input values that are in the form. That those values can be the default ones, or the ones that the user sent. And this is important because on the next stage, we are going to validate the form, and we need the values of the form. Here, for example, there are other things done, like detecting which button triggered the submit of the form, and this is important because depending on which button the user clicked, the form should do one thing or another. Also, the validate handler and the submit handler that I forgot to add. This is the last chance to alter or to modify the form, and I'm not saying alter because there are no more alters here. Here we have the process callback and the after build callback, and we'll see later. Those are callbacks that you can add for the elements of the form. This is the diagram. The diagram has many details, but this is uploaded to the. I uploaded some time ago to the Drupal.org page, so you can check it on the Form API help pages. So, don't worry, you don't get all the details. But as you see, it's just, well, as I say, it's from the form build. The Drupal traverses the array, processing all the elements on the array from top to bottom. For the process callbacks, that's the one thing that it does. It's called, they are processed top to bottom, so the elements that are on the top of the form or on the other part of the form are called first. This is usually used for elements to expand to multiple elements. The typical example is, for example, the date element. When you add the date element on the form, you just add one element, but when it's sent to the user, it may be 3 elements. For example, if you separate the date between month, day, and year, so there are 3 elements. So it's the process callback that takes one element from the Form API build, from the form build array, and expands to 3 different elements that will be rendered for the user. It has more than 100 uses in core, so it's kind of common. So you may need, especially for custom elements. Other example is adding the GS conditionally on a field value as well. And then we have the after build callbacks. They are called bottom to top because this is, I mean, the function that processes the form is recursive. It goes, recursively down until the last element and then goes up, calling, doing some things, but one of the things that it does is calling the after build. It's unlikely you need it because, as you see, in core there are less than 10 uses. So, I mean, you may need it, but it's not common at all. One example, for example, is removing elements after a file disk check. This is something I saw in the core, and I don't remember exactly the case, but that form wants to display something about some files in the file system. So in the after build, what it does is check that the file is really there. If not, it removes the element, so it's not present on the final form. And also the handler detection, the validation and the submit. It's more simple than it seems. It's just the button pressed. If it has any validation or submit handler, they are the one chosen when the validation or submit stage are run. And if not, the form level validate or submit function is the one that is used. Next stage is the validation. It's when the form is checked, it checks that the security and the values are valid. One of the checks is the CSSRF token that we have seen before that prevents some type of attacks. It validates all elements bottom to top. It runs the core validations, if any, of each element, and call elements validate if there are any defined. And this stage can change the form and the form state. Okay, it depends on the usage. You may need to change the form or form state for the rebuilding, and also it can enable the rebuilding. So we enter in the rebuilding loop. The validation is kind of simple. You have the checking the token, then the recursive traverse of the elements, calling the core validation, and if this is not the root element, we call the elements validation. And if you are in the root element of the form, we call the form validation handlers. If there are validation errors, the errors are added to the render form so the user can see them. The submit handlers are skipped because the validation failed, so no submit handlers can be run. And if the validation fails, the rebuild is forbidden. It can be rebuilt. So it's the same form is sent to the user with the errors. This makes sense because if there is any error, you shouldn't change the form. The next stage, is the submit stage. Is just executing the form, let's say. So doing any actions required for the form to accomplish the task it's related to, like creating a node or doing whatever the form does. It's done during the submit handlers, whether it is a button or form. It depends on what the user clicked. If there is any response, it's returned. Remember, it can be a markup, for example, if you just want to send a message to the user, or a redirection if you want to send the user to another place. Like, for example, when you create a node, the user is usually redirected to the created node. At the end, the submit decide what to do with the response. Here we can change also the form and the form state usually for the next rebuild, because it doesn't make sense to do any change of a form that is not going to be used anymore. So usually you change it for the next rebuild. For example, when you click on the AJAX on the button to add a new element, what it's going to do here probably is to add a new element on the form state or any variables that then in the build function will be used to decide how many elements are added to the form. And of course, it can enable the rebuilding. This is the diagram for this part. It's also simple. Just if you have to process the submit, the handlers are run, and then it does some things with the cache. It's kind of complex, so it's better to see on the diagram, on the complete diagram, and how the cache is handled. But luckily, it's kind of automatically. We will see later. And let's go to the final stage. That's the rebuild. And this is the stage that allows a complex form with the rebuilding loop that I displayed on the beginning of this session. Also, multi-step forms, dynamic elements can be added, removed, etc. AJAX call that modifies the form uses them in the rebuild. The thing is, in the rebuilding, all the steps, the retrieve, the prepare, and the actual building are run again. So after the submit, let's say, the form is rebuilt again, and the code has the opportunity to modify the form in the sense of creating a new form with the change required. As I said, before the change in the form and the form state that are the ones that allow form change when it's rebuilt, because the logic to create a dynamic form is usually in the build form function. This is the diagram. First, we go again to the retrieve form stage. That's the first part of the first stage. Then the cache is enabled for post requests. Then we prepare the form. That's running the alter hooks and everything. And then Drupal decides if the form should be cached or not. And then we go to the recursive build process. That's the one that creates the render array. And then we are the form is rebuilt and can be sent to the user. So the cache and the persistence is one of the mechanisms very important in the form API. The name is cache. I mean, in the code is named cache, but it's persistence plus cache. It's something that it's maybe confusing on the beginning, but it includes the persistence of the data. For example, it allows AJAX calls, multi-step forms, dynamic elements, etc. Because what it does is to persist the data from one request to another. Usually, Drupal takes care of it. It's auto-enabled. You don't have to deal with it usually, but in some advanced cases, you may have to deal with it. But usually, it's something that it's created automatically. What is exactly this mechanism? Well, the form and the form state are saved to the database, to some, I don't remember if it's a cache table or a special table, sorry. But they are saved to the database, and in the next request, Drupal can relate the new request with the data saved in the disk. For the form state, only some properties of the form state are saved, not all the things that are in the form state. So if you want to persist data in the form state, you have to use the CRUD function. I mean, functions to get data, set data and ask if there is data on the form state. So previously in other version of Drupal, you can just add things to the form state. In this case, I mean, in Drupal, since Drupal 8, I guess, you have to use the CRUD operations to persist the data. And the AJAX requests are kind of similar. They follow the same workflow. But it's important that at the end, they return to the browser what the AJAX callback returns. The AJAX callback is a property on the element on the form that defines the AJAX capability of the element. So that what you define here, it's a PHP function or method. It only returns the data. So that means that when the AJAX request is received by Drupal, Drupal goes through the workflow, creates the form, and usually with some changes, and at the end, the AJAX callback takes part of that form to be returned to the user. It's important because it's not a submit function. Okay, it's not when you run the AJAX callback. It's not to modify the form, but to gather the results. The AJAX requests need the persistence and the cache persistence. It's auto-enabled when Drupal detects that there is any element with AJAX enabled. And of course, the AJAX requests can also return some AJAX commands, AJAX commands, that if you don't know what this AJAX command, it's something very interesting to know. If you use AJAX, it's basically to return a set of operations that will be done on the client using the JavaScript layer once the data is received on the browser. For example, removing some element of the page, or adding some element, or doing some things, some different things. It's something that it works on forms, but it also works on other kind of requests. Now about the AJAX, well, there is an element that triggers the AJAX request. As I said before, the form is built, validated, and executed. And during submit, usually some values are changed, and the rebuild is enabled. During the rebuild, the form is well, the change that you have done on the values cause the form to have some different to have some changes. And as I said before, the AJAX callback returns the changed part of the form, or the complete form, or AJAX commands. So the user sees wherever the AJAX callback has done. Oh, sorry. And at the end, the JavaScript layer takes the response and processes it, inserting markup into HTML or whatever it should be done. And what you shouldn't do with the AJAX request, as I said before, don't change the form during the AJAX callback. This is something I have seen a lot of times, and the documentation in Drupal was not very clear about this. I think now it's very clear. But it's important. It only gathers the results. It doesn't change things. It shouldn't change things. Any change should be done during the rebuilding stage. And the complete workflow illustration, if you haven't seen it on the Drupal.org, is something like this. It's a little bit complex, but I think that it has many details. As you see, it has many red boxes with explanation on the diagram, because the flow is not so easy to understand what it happens. But reading the red boxes, I think it's I wouldn't say very clear because it's a complex topic, but I think it's enough clear. And if not, this diagram is in a GitHub repository, and you can download it and modify using the one program, a software libre, open source Program to modify and propose change. So if you see any problem or whatever, you can alter and update it. I have to say that there are some simplifications, okay? There are things that are not included here, like batch and program forms are not covered. They are very similar, but there are some subtle differences. The subforms, that it's something that I learned it existed after doing this session for the first time, but also they are very similar. Some details, how the HTML ID are handled, some edge cases, some security details, and more other details. But I think that the most important part, especially to deal with developing complex forms, is covered in this session. And if you have to keep something from this talk, here are the key points. You have to use the forms build function for not big change in this case, but to create the form, of course, and alters for big changes. The process and the after builds callbacks are for adjustments and tweaks, okay, not something that you will use often. Use the rebuilding loop for dynamic forms. Use the form state to store your own variables. If you, I mean, you probably will need to store some variables if you are using the rebuilding loop. And please use the AJAX callback to return responses, not to change the form. And also check the Drupal examples module. If you don't know, it's a module that it only has examples of how to code with Drupal. It covers many different topics of Drupal. And it includes a submodule about Form API, and it's a good set of examples. And that's it. So, do you have any question? Does anybody has any question? I know it's a hard topic, but you may review the session and get more details. So then in that case, well, thanks to the sponsors, the Platinum one, the Gold, Silver, and Bronze sponsors, and thank you.